So yes, I can. So to speak, meet with Sarah on, even as regards rather my stance, because what's fundamental is our values. That are much linked to the culture we're in and have experience of. I've argued that we're the victim of the religion, if there is such in our culture and it's dominant. And its impact on our values. And that instead our spirituality should reflect our values as they are. And they may not be in alignment with the supposed dominant religious view, for instance, or secular view. There are many instances in the world where, it's a secular government, but population that has a lot of religious people still in it that have survived one way or another. Well, whatever the religion may superficially present as being, what matters is the actual values of the people, especially the decision makers concerned. Our problem is ever trying to find a harmony between persons and, on a grand scale, even nations that have conflicting values in some way. If we purpose to change the values, we'll probably have war on our hands. Tension, strife, a great inharmony. If we try to find a structure that tolerates the other, the fact that they have different values, well, that could be good depending on what the compromise costs each side as they see it. Simply separateness may be a simple and workable solution. There's the communist world and there's the non-communist world. But if one or the other decides they're going to impose and invade, well, an olive branch might not be terribly successful. And if it isn't, and you realise you're up against a malevolence, then you look for the best strategy to solve your situation. Making it clear that you're going to kill the enemy come what may is not a good policy, as Sarah points out. But if you find compromise just is not acceptable to both parties, you probably have force on your hands, and you'll need a strategy of how best to carry it out. You could say you're then confronted with cold, pragmatic decision-making, but you are likely to still be influenced by what your values are in doing this, though the experience of the conflict may start to unhinge some of those values. So our experience can be costly, but our values may develop. In the short run, for good or for bad. In the long run, we trust for good. Whatever, trust in a God, your God, that cares for you is unquestionably a blessing in many very difficult circumstances. And also seems to preserve a humanity that still reaches into the conflict situation. We are not merciless. We do not treat prisoners badly. We try to avoid harming civilian populations. In battle, recognizing the role of something like the Red Cross, international humanitarian help, compassion for refugees, care of prisoners of war, etc., etc., etc. Does this weaken our war effort as regards winning? I don't think so. It's a big message to your own people that you count. We're in a difficult, desperate situation, but you all count. And as far as we can make good decisions, we do. In a war, you need to trust that your leaders, your decision makers, have your welfare at heart, truly. Else, as in the Russian front, First World War, you shoot your officers and start walking home. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.
So we find there are not always answers. If your people lose confidence in your care of them, you may have revolution on your hands, or such a poor war effort that you lose to the enemy anyway. And then, of course, the elite is probably tried for war trials or massacred, or, it turns to custard. The whole point is there are not answers in a world where you're not loving God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. And the whole of the population will not be doing this, and certainly not the same God if they are. They are immature. They are children. And children can be like Lord of the Flies or Animal Farm. Not a holy, wonderful place like heaven. And in this situation we learn most fundamentally what we truly value and what we will avoid like the plague if we possibly can. You see, we are here learning, training, and everything here, good or bad, changes, comes and goes. Everything passes. Everything passes away. The Buddhists understood this, but without the assurance of heaven, you can't abide this. Life is tragic. Whereas with the God in your value system, in your being, life is tragic but to purpose, and ultimately such great purpose as justifies the apparent tragedies that you're in. In other words, the supposition, the assumption, or more humanly, the trusting in God, is the solution to living here in the world of the transitory, uncertainty, not knowing. I choose to trust in God because almost by definition, to not do so implies a hell of an experience, ultimately. In other words, to trust is an extremely rational thing to do. Quite simply, it's the best way of coping with the unknown and the difficult. And if it's a trust in a God that is all-powerful and all-loving, well, we start to reflect what we worship. Or if you like, it's almost the other way round. He is that for us because of who we are. And that's the amazing thing, isn't it? Not that I become like my God, which is the way the world tries to run religion. Give you a God that's appropriate, encourage and press you to follow such, and you'll become wonderful like your God. No, not at all. It's that you follow your God, personification of your values, most earnestly, and learn quickly the way to go as regards happiness, success, even the miraculous. And your life becomes wonderful, even here amidst the chaos of childhood, unknowing, uncertainty. You see, the good and happy child, you could say, well, it's the one that's loved. It's the one that believes they are loved and trusts that they are loved and runs to the parent when they need help and accepts most willingly the parent's solution because in the child's view that's always worked in the past and we've come through and got through. You know, the child that trusts the parent is the happy child, even though the parent is not God. Not so wonderful in the other people's view at all. But everything to the child. You know, my mum hated Dad. You could say she was therefore not an ideal citizen, not an ideal parent. But to me she was. To me she loved me. That was my view. And that contrasted, of course, with not having her much at all for the first 5 years, and being in a world that was not so attached and caring of me as I saw it. And now, and I'm presuming this looking back, I can't remember how the transition came. I was, not storing memories too well when I was 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. But somewhere around 6, 7, 8, I was very clear I'm a person that loves Mum and she loves me. And that transformed my life, even though she was largely secular. I mean, God might exist, but he's certainly not like the religion, sort of thing. Wouldn't have been her view. And with Dad, God is just twaddle boy nonsense. Not that he ever spoke to me about such. But that was his declared view, at the very least from Mum's point of view. And Mum's point of view was everything to me, of course. So whether you can say despite this or because of this, I had a relationship with Mum which gave me a confidence and a joy and a sanctuary to retreat to. And of course Dad was actually providing, whether he was villain of the piece or not, the security in the background and the protection. The finance, quite literally, and the order in which Mum did operate, like it or not, and I was brought up, at least from 5 onwards. But the two of them majorly influencing even the first 5 years, of course. Though obviously I was not with them in large measure then. Now, of course, I can look back and say, well, it was the love of God that was with me and even with them, although they didn't know it. And I choose to hold this is the case. I choose to hold this is the case because this is the best understanding that I can see as best to choose to believe and trust in. In other words, trust in a loving, all-powerful God is a great consolation, just as trusting in your parents, though the world might think they're not that perfect, is a great blessing to the child. For they learn quickly what is to be learnt, and become, in some sense, harmony with the world they find themselves in. And it's that sort of setup that brings life. This ability and this confidence to go for that which you trust to be good and steer your way through according to your experience. It gives you a great resilience to life's difficulties, you see. Not necessarily enough to overcome, but certainly it's the best option. I say certainly. It seems to be the best option. Very much so, from my perspective, but not from everyone's perspective. So they choose to be secular, like I did up to 24 years of age. It's the way things are. And if you're trusting in a God that is ruling and loving all, you can accept that things are like this. I don't mean, therefore, not change them where you are freely able to. You can still move in the right direction from what you see and the faults that you see. But you are not overwhelmed by such because you are experienced in trusting in the goodness of God. And you've seen the consequence of doing so, So you exercise trust even in the most astonishing difficulties. You are prepared, therefore, in some sense, to cope with life here in the world of good and bad, uncertainty and change, material world. And you live with the assurance in your heart, what you choose to believe, that it's to purpose, that you are graduating in understanding and competence, in some spiritual fullness of life sense that qualifies you for heaven, a dimension beyond your understanding called adulthood, spiritual adulthood, and life eternal. And there's no point in not trusting and believing this. There's no gain. In fact, there's terrible loss and fear and concern, or lack of help, lack of support, concern that erodes and erects your daily life as you worry about unknown futures and death and everything that the secular are concerned with, that a trust and a loving and all-powerful Heavenly Dad avoids. You'd be mad not to avoid it. Love you, Heavenly Dad. Thank you for this. I'm sure this line of reasoning is simply because of what I'm wedded to, which is trusting you by your grace and love and kindness. And I'm so thankful for it. And I would that others that don't have it did have it, because life would be so much happier, full of love and kindness and hope and joy as a consequence. So, come with me. You know, everyone's called. Of course, I want all my children, don't I, to prosper and be in health, happiness and joy, hope, fullness of life, and with me in paradise. Of course. I'd be mad not to want that, wouldn't I? I'm not choosing it anyway. I'm glad I have chosen, in Christian terms, to follow Jesus, although Christians don't follow Jesus. They follow Paul. But I've decided to follow Jesus myself. Why? Well, the story seems to me to touch on what my values are. Not entirely, not completely. I'm not worshipping the story. But parts of it are the best things I've found. And jon17 is definitely uppermost in that area. Bless you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.